My name is Timothy Galvin. I'm a retired United States Navy captain. My active service was during the Korean War from 1952 to 1956, at which time I served in the Navy in the capacity of an engineering chief officer on a destroyer escort by the name of the USS Strickland DE333. It is of note that many veterans faced far harsher concerns than I did and faced the enemy. I never faced the enemy during my tour of duty. It was a tour designed by the Navy using picket destroyers to monitor aircraft entering the United States protective zones, which they had to identify themselves, and we would track them and keep at least anybody coming here in an honest frame of mind, not to do any harm to the United States. The other facet of us was submarine hunting, in which during the Cold War there were these so-called war edgy games with the Russians, in which they had submarines off of our coast, and we had to monitor their movements, keep track of them, and in some cases perhaps urge them to leave our shores. The other phase of my life was a routine as an officer on that ship, in which I served as a chief engineer and as an exec and as command duty officers, and with various assignments. Probably the one of most interest to me was qualified as the sea detail officer of the deck, in which it was my responsibility to get the ship underway from a pier, but even more so than that, to bring a ship in and moor it alongside a pier or in a nest of other destroyers. This required the team operation of all the members of the ship, not just me, but it was a challenge and I enjoyed it. The other big challenge, two of them actually, we sailed through two hurricanes, so the only enemy I really met was Mother Nature. And a hurricane on a ship the size of a DE was something else again. As a added item, so-called, I was an expert in engineering, and therefore several times I was transferred from one ship to another ship at sea in what was called a breeches buoy, in which a cable was strung between the two ships while they were speeding along, and then I sat in this metal chair strapped in and was passed from one ship to another. I was too young to be scared, or too stupid to be scared, but in any case it was an interesting part of my career. Then I moved to inactive duty in 1956, in which I participated in many different things with the Naval Reserve. Chief among them was with the Navy prison system, in which I wrote up and directed educational programs at the various brigs in Boston, New London, Newport, and the big gray castle in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
How do you think your time in the Navy maybe trained you to be leadership skills or different management skills like that you used in your later career?
I'm sure that all of the regimentation process that I went through and the move up the ladder, so-called, aboard ship, promotion-wise, and subsequent to that, was a recognition of leadership skills that I had already acquired. I was a very lucky leader in the fact that I led a group of dedicated Americans who did their job extremely well. And because they did their job extremely well, that shone on me, and I was a recipient of the honors I have received because of the work that my men did.
And what was your engineering job like? Maybe what were some of the things you preferred about that or didn't prefer about
It's
that?
an interesting question, because when I reported aboard the ship from Officers Candidate School, the commanding officer interviewing me said, "I've assigned you to engineering." I said, "Did you look at my school record?" He said, "Yes, I've looked at it. And you must have seen that the poorest subject I had was engineering." He said, "We'll teach you how to be an engineer." Well, he didn't teach me, but I had 4 chief petty officers who were simply superb Americans, dedicated to their job, dedicated to the country that they served. And that is acquired skills in engineering that I acquired on duty, supervising the various engine components that drive the ship and all electrical facilities of the ship. So it was hands-on learning that it's still, that I was able to achieve what I did achieve. And then for 5 years after I left, I was called back for 2-month periods because of my so-called new experience in engineering, that I was able to then translate that into updating engineering technical manuals for training stations in the U.S. Navy.
You told me once how you helped design a more efficient system of tanks on the
The
Navy?
particular ship I was on was a diesel, and it involved Fairbanks Morse engines, which used air as starting for beginning of it. They had these Worthington air compressors, which would make enough starting air for what they called 7 starts and stops. These are used when you're mooring or getting underway. You have this tight maneuvering, and you have to be able to go from a head to a stern or back, and you would soon run out of air. In other words, in the old system, you had 7 of these starts. My chiefs sat down with me and we said, "There's got to be a better way," and we designed a 3,000-pound air flask, which would be filled while we were underway, and then allowed with a crossover valve system to be flooding the control mechanisms, so that immediately the stops and starts went from 7 to 18, and that improved immensely the mooring and the underway procedures that are used with this particular ship. And view ships, for some reason or other, accepted it, and I'm documented somewhere buried in a view ship's manual. I designed the 3,000-pound air flask for diesel ships, but it wasn't me. It was those wonderful chief petty officers trained to their duty by the Navy, who were simply marvelous. One interesting item, to me anyway, was I was a command duty officer. I was authorized to command a ship by my CO because of actions I was able to take on the bridge. It happened during one of the hurricane storms. We were in the harbor in Newport, told to get underway and join this nest of ships, which we did. The biggest ship in it was a destroyer tender, which was 3 times the size of mine. But then we were told that we might have to break up this nest, the storm was getting so bad, and move out of there. I was called to the wardroom of the largest ship, and the CO, who was a 4-striper captain, told me, he pointed to an officer of his, he said, "He will come to your ship and move it for you." I said, "No, he cannot come to my ship and move it." And he said, "Who are you telling me?" I was a lieutenant junior grade at the time. And I said, "I'm telling you because I'm the one that's assigned to that ship in command of it. My commanding officer is ashore." He said, "Listen, young man, your career is in jeopardy right now. This man's going, my officer is going to take your ship." I said, "Your officer is not going to be allowed on the ship." The next morning, he sent for my commanding officer, and I told my commanding officer what I did. He went over and he told this captain off that I was the one, and I was correct.